Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have an introduction today for you for a film that may require a little introduction. I've shown it before at York, London, but never here before. I didn't want to show something last year, or in most years, that would be a down in the trenches war picture. We showed the Glenn Miller story instead, which I hope you enjoyed. But now we're showing the Steel Helmet, which is a deep and dirty, down in the trenches picture. It is one of the only handful of films that depicts life in the Korean War and was made during the Korean War in Los Angeles, of course, in 1951 as the war raged. It tells a very simple story with a very excellent, classy tale, but not the classy of The Prisoner of Zenda, and not the classy of, say, On Moonlight Bay. This is again that use of grainy stock footage to make it look like war footage, so when they have a couple of clip-in war scenes that are stock footage, they'll all kind of look like it's all the same kind of crummy footage. It tells the story of a simple story following a sergeant who wears a famous steel helmet with a bullet in it, a bullet hole in it. The story is, and I'm told possible, not probable, but possible, a North Korean hit him with a bullet. It hit the top of the steel helmet, ricocheted around, and fell out and never hurt him. He keeps the helmet as a souvenir and will only wear that. It begins with the steel helmet literally rising from the ground as the titles run. This man is alone in North Korea, South Korea, but fighting the North Koreans. He's all alone. He's lying there not knowing if he's dead or alive, and he finally awakens to the touch of a little boy, whom he thoughtlessly calls a gook. Me no gook. He's played by a little me South Korea. They form a bond of friendship and hobble off to fight the war together. He gives him a rifle and a helmet way too big for him, and he calls him short round of artillery. So the Sarge and short round head out. They presently encounter an embattled unit of the squad that's left. The sergeant is the highest ranking person. They ask him to take over. He shows them all the tricks of the jungle, and they get out of that one more or less alive. Throughout the movie, it'll be one scrape after another. So some background things you need to know about the making of. They couldn't film in Korea, obviously. They rounded up all the Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, Filipinos as appropriate for all the appropriate roles. They used Korean graduate students and even a few Chinese graduate students from UCLA Film School to pretend they were the Korean soldiers. They cut every corner, they wasted no money. And one of my criteria always is, for a good movie, it's what you do with what you got that matters in the end. They had about $80,000 to film this movie, which was a pittance today and was even worse in those days. So we were busily involved in the steel helmet, making it while the war was raging in Korea. And it was a patriotic movie. But nobody exactly wins. And at the beginning, its message is, this is wartime. This is the story of one sergeant and one troop. This was as true to life as we could make it. It says that because Samuel Fuller, I believe there is an end credit, but I'm not. Anyway, Samuel Fuller, who directed it, produced it, and wrote it, was a real veteran. He had been a veteran of World War II. He went in with the military combat units that filmed places like Dachau after liberation. He fought in the infantry in the Big Red One, so he knows what he's doing. And Samuel Fuller said famously, I've quoted it to you here before, the only real way to make an audience understand the war would be that if I were allowed to shoot real bullets out of the screen over their heads. Anything outside of that is an approximation. We're trying to instill the fear and the courage and all the mixed emotions that go with wartime. And I can't do it unless I can fire bullets out over their heads. Next best thing, rub their noses in it. Get them down in the trenches with the men. Give them their heroes to root for, their enemies to root against, the understanding when the enemies sometimes prevail, when sadness prevails, when nothing can be done, when people die in the trench beside you, the grittiness of Samuel Fuller's direction. I want you in the trenches. I want you knowing these men, as fighting men, as vulnerable men, as men trapped. There's no serious female role except for some peasants because of the nature of the story. You don't know if the Korean's coming around the corner, friend or foe. You're in a hopeless morass. It was predictive of Vietnam, of course, years later without knowing it, where you couldn't go forward, you couldn't go back. I think we've said enough. There's no going back. But look at Samuel Fuller's tremendous attention to detail. And he said, I can't get over the people who look into a war movie and say only the authenticity of every little thing. That isn't a Luger, that's a Colt 45. Well, excuse me, but sometimes in Hollywood, you have to lose your imagination. The steel helmet won a commendation along the way from veterans groups as being not without one or two flaws, but one of the best, most authentic Army movies ever made. The steel helmet with Gene Evans in his breakout role as the Sarge. Up next, as soon as we can get around to you're settling in and getting ready for a little dirt and grit with the steel helmet.